The other thing I want to remind you of is it's not just when the hurricane hits that the damage occurs. I mean, it rips people's lives apart, their residences, their workplaces, completely destroys neighborhoods, and it takes a long time to build those up.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina, and I am your host. And tonight, or today, or this morning, Hurricane Havoc. It's the season of hurricane. It's upon us, and it has been upon us. And we've heard a lot this 2022 hurricane season that it's been a very light season. Well, it may have come in like a lamb, but it's leaving like a lion. And we've had hurricanes, we've had cyclones, and not just here in the United States. We've had, we talked about the storms, the rains in Pakistan. And there were tremendous storms in Fiona. Fiona hit Puerto Rico really, really hard. And, this little island, really just a spit of land, a barrier island, was hit not too long ago by Maria and hasn't fully recovered and now has been hit again. And it's really interesting when we talk about storms and we talk about resilience and we talk about mitigation and adaptation. It's really, really easy to throw out these words and not realize that in order for countries, places, island nations, and states to recover, they need something. And that something is money, and lots of it. They also need a very well functioning government. And that's not something that we can take for granted either. And just when we need very strong governance, it seems like people all over the world are losing their minds. What's going on? I don't know. But it's something that we can ill afford. And when we're looking at these storms, it's not just the storms themselves. I mean, one of the things that we like to talk about here at the Climate Emergency Forum is the feedbacks. These are things that play on each other. And one of the things that I like to say is nothing happens in a vacuum and everything affects something else. When a wave goes higher, the boat will be rockier. The boat is not going to be rockier without rocky waves. When this happens, that happens. Thus, deforestation in the Himalayas, or Himalayas, however you pronounce it, really led to a greater catastrophe for Pakistan because there weren't those trees, there weren't those roots to soak in that water and hold back the water. It just rushed down. So when we have a climate catastrophe on one end, it's not going to be just that one thing. It's not going to be just a lack of trees. It's going to be a lack of trees, mudslides, rushing water, greater snow melt. It just goes on and on. And so one of the things that I'm looking at in terms of the storm in Florida that's happening actually as we speak, Ian, I look at infrastructure and the fact that the hubris, the great hubris of humanity, the entire Florida coast is just, you have these amazing condos, these $1 million condos, these beautiful homes right there at sea level practically. I mean, it's almost, I wouldn't say asking for it, but it's not smart. It's not smart engineering. It's not smart planning. And so, of course, we're going to see greater damages than we would have seen if we would have had planning of homes and high-rise buildings a little further inland. But of course, the expensive real estate is right there on the beach. You get those beach views. And so it's going to be much more of a catastrophe than it had to be. And I'd like to say what's going to make it even worse is we do have this foolish building right on the coast. So of course we see homes sweeping into the ocean and everything that's in those homes. I don't want to be callous. I know people are losing their homes, but the deck chairs, the plastic, the furnaces, everything in the ocean, polluting evermore our oceans. And so these are my thoughts on hurricanes and the havoc they bring. And I'd like to know, Peter or Paul, which one of you want to share about, what your thoughts are on hurricanes?
So my first thought goes to the people in Puerto Rico, of course. The latest numbers I have there is that 900,000 people are without water. 700,000 people are living in the dark. They're still without power. And the finance people think that this is going to be a $1 billion disaster for Puerto Rico, which is, of course, has already been hit. They've had Maria already. So we look at what's happening in Florida, and we watch this probably unprecedented Category 4 storm, hurricane, and it's gone right up Florida. The damage and the disturbance of people's lives is going to be absolutely unbelievable. And this has been going on for years, of course. This is nothing new. And every so often when we have one of these disasters, and of course, we're not in climate change anymore. I mean, it's so obvious we're in climate catastrophe, right? This is not change. This is catastrophe. And it affects all of us, and it's going to affect more and more of us. It's going to affect all of us. So we hear, periodically, well, this is a wake-up call. We don't wake up, right? We just keep on going in the same old way, I mean, we hear adaptation talked a lot, but there's nothing happening with adaptation, really. I mean, if you're going to seriously adapt to what we're going to have, it's a heck of a lot of money, massive amount of money, massive amounts of construction, et cetera, et cetera. Then, when we get the latest scientific reports in, right? What methane's doing, what the temperature's doing. Again, we hear wake-up call. But again, we don't wake up. So, yeah, I mean, like Regina, yeah, you have to wonder, right? I mean, are we living in the world insane asylum? Is that what's going on here? I mean, it's just unbelievable. Now, there is, though, a reason for this. Why did we have all these unprecedented heat waves, fires, droughts right across the northern hemisphere? And why are we getting this in Florida now? Well, the global temperature has increased 1.12 degrees C, but the northern hemisphere has increased 1.4 degrees C. That's a lot. So that's a lot of energy, a lot of heat, a lot of damage, and it's going to get, as I keep on saying, it's going to get way, way worse.
Thank you, Peter. You brought up the magic word, and that is money. And if nation states such as Puerto Rico don't have money, or other countries such as Pakistan, they are going to suffer. Paul, I would love to hear what you have to say about the storm, particularly about Florida.
Well, just to add to one of Peter's last comment, you have to remember that the land is actually warming at about double the rate that the oceans are warming. So, northern hemisphere has warmed 1.4. Any land surfaces in the northern hemisphere probably warmed over 2 for the most part, maybe even 2.5 degrees Celsius. So the problem that we're seeing now is we're seeing multiple hits on the same places. And how do these places recover? So I would argue that Puerto Rico never really recovered yet from, the first hurricane, which absolutely devastated the country, devastated the place, shut down power for extended periods of time, contaminated crops, contaminated water with the large storm surges. And now they go and get hit by a similar sized storm, Hurricane Fiona, which also did lots of damage to other countries in the Caribbean. And also it hit Cuba and it knocked out the power entirely in Cuba. So 11 million people in Cuba were without power. And many of these people still don't have power. They're working to restore it, but it's incredible the large number of people that are affected. And these storms aren't even, they're huge, but because of the warming sea surface temperature, they're getting much more powerful because of the jet stream changes and slowdown and waviness. Often these storms are moving slower, so their impact in a location that they're over are that much more severe. So people always talk about rebuilding and, we've got to bring things back to, in quotes, normal. But my question really is how long will it be before we can no longer rebuild, where the money just isn't there? So these places will then be left in tatters, and people will have to move to safer locations, whether it be within the same country, inland, or other countries. So that will cause mass exodus of people. Speaking of mass exodus of people, there was like 1 million or 2 million people in Florida that just migrated, and many of them in their cars to escape the power of Hurricane Ian, which is now, as we speak, it hit, I think, the eye wall. Basically, it came ashore about 3 p.m. this afternoon, so just about 4 hours ago. And with 150 mile per hour winds, which is 240 kilometer per hour winds, that's the circular rotation winds. And its forward motion was about 9 miles per hour. I'll use miles per hour right now. So on the right front quadrant of the storm, the winds were actually 150 plus 9 or 159 miles per hour. Basically, that's high-end Category 4, Category 5 winds, and those just raise and destroy anything in their path. In the left front quadrant, the wind speeds would be a bit lower. They'd be the 150 mile per hour rotation, less 9 miles per hour, so they'd be 141. And in that quadrant, the rainfall, is enormous and, expected to hit several feet in some locations. And there's also lots of spin-off tornadoes occurring. And, the storm surge is the biggest thing. They were expecting on some parts of the coast to have 18-foot storm surges, as high as 18 foot, which would be far larger storm surges than they've ever had in that region before. Now, on the positive side is the storm is coming ashore about 100 miles south of Tampa. So, it was originally headed right for Tampa, and if it hit that built up area, the damage would be probably an order of magnitude greater than the magnitude of damage that we'll see and will be reported in the next couple of days. The other thing I want to remind you of is it's not just when the hurricane hits that the damage occurs. I mean, it rips people's lives apart, their residences, their workplaces, completely destroys neighborhoods, and it takes a long time to build those up. And also remember what happened in Florida that was all across the news not too long ago. We had the collapse of a high rise on the beach, and that's because of the soils being undercut and saturated by rising sea level, by these type of storms. So if we had a storm, when these strong hurricanes hit regions with apartment buildings and high rises, especially in a place like Florida, there's a lot of erosion underneath the ground, and we can expect more of these sort of building collapses to occur, and they can be quite long. They can be years after the actual hurricane event. So, we've completely changed the climate system. We've changed the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere is 7% higher for every degree Celsius rise in temperature. So we're, over 10% at least in many locations. The jet streams have slowed and are wavier, so these storms are not moving through areas. They're sticking around and for long durations, dropping huge amounts of rainfall, causing more and more problems. So, hurricane havoc is just, one aspect. a very grave aspect of abrupt climate system change that's occurring.
I just love the phrase hurricane havoc. And it's not, I appreciate the fact that we're looking at all the aspects of how these hurricanes affect just everything. And something that hasn't been mentioned is the oil refineries. There are a couple of oil refineries that are right there on that western coast as well. I think it would be foolhardy to think that there won't be any type of damage, environmental damage from that.
Well,
Yeah.
what I was just going to say was that as I was following it, it was going to arrive at a category 2, and then it was going to dissipate higher up. But it looks like it's another example of what is a relatively new phenomenon, which the scientists are calling rapid intensification of hurricanes, cyclones, etc. In that case, all the projections will actually be, as they always are, they're going to be way low compared to actually the damage is going to be done, because we're going to see this on a routine basis, presumably, rapid intensification and massive amounts of damage done.
Yes, and today, as we're filming this video, I mean, we have Hurricane Ian happening in real time, and just a few days ago, we had Fiona, after causing all that damage in Puerto Rico, Cuba, other parts of the Caribbean. In past years, a storm like that would have likely continued veering to the right because of the Coriolis force and actually missing the Maritimes. But there was an upper level trough because of a very curved, wavy jet stream, which actually pulled Fiona over to the left. So it had a direct hit on the Maritimes. So the guiding factors responsible for where these storms hit has changed because of the greatly warming Arctic, slowing the jet stream, making it wavier, creating troughs where they weren't before, and then pulling the storm over. And this is the exact same thing that happened to Hurricane Sandy. It made a left turn when it hit New York, and that was only because it was pulled in by the underlying conditions of the jet stream. And this storm, as far as Canada is concerned, it's very likely to be the most expensive storm for Canada, certainly for the Maritimes. And one of the problems is that people did insurance. They think their house is covered, but they don't have insurance for a storm surge. So a lot of the coastal regions in the Maritimes that where houses were washed into the ocean in Newfoundland, for example, large vast portions of beaches in PEI were washed away and quite visible on satellite maps. You could see all the sediments leaving the island. And PEI, people there are still without power for the most part. Most of the island is still without power 4 or 5 days later. So it's not just Cuba, it's not just Puerto Rico, it's also parts of Canada, the whole province of PEI. Nova Scotia, also lots of damage, lots of power out still. So these events take a long time to recover from.
Yes, and of course, as we have more and more, it's going to be more and more difficult for us, and we'll see more migration within our country. It'll be interesting to see, and I think this has been a really, really good conversation. I know that I learned a lot, as I always do, from talking to the two of you, Peter and Paul. And for those of you who are still watching, I want to first thank you. And if you have learned something from this talk, please go ahead and give us a like. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. More people are able to see our videos that way. And consider sharing this video with a friend. And if you have any ideas about the hurricanes that we've talked about in the distant past, or this particular one here in Florida, please share it with us in the comments below, because we really do like to read those. So thank you very much, and I can't wait to see you all at the next Climate Emergency Forum.